Well, hello, everyone. I'm Reverend Karla, and welcome to Spirituality Matters, a podcast that focuses on the intersectionality of spirituality and humanity. Let's settle in and find that sacred space between here where I am and there where you are, and be reminded that the holy transcends our physical bodies, and our time together can be just as sacred and meaningful as if we were sitting beside one another. And Marlana, that feels like we're sitting beside one another, doesn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
I have the honor of interviewing tonight. Well, kind of like introducing you more than just an interview. This is Marlana Glaeser, and I'm going to tell a little bit about her, but then I'm also going to give an announcement about her. Marlana is a single mother who has a story about her childhood emotional neglect, her childhood sexual abuse, and years of religious trauma. So a gentle warning goes with our discussions as we go into those topics for you today. Be supported, and if this is something that you feel like you need to take a break from, then perhaps next week will be better for you. But if you feel safe enough, stay here with us, because as always, we handle these conversations gently and try to provide a safe space for you. Marlana grew up in a conservative Christian fundamentalist church, and boy, does she have the stories for you. So when we talk about the journey of deconstructing and healing and really finding yourself, Marlana's story will resonate with so many of you. And through her therapy work and her the trauma-informed therapist, and remember that phrase, trauma-informed, because we're going to talk a lot about that. She has found her path to healing, and she is the owner of Gentle Hands Consulting, a lifestyle consulting business who assists others with in what she refers to as their trauma healing jumpstart. And what I'm honored to announce is that Marlana now joins Numa Soul Center for Transformation as our Director of Spiritual Guidance and Communication. And so Marlana will be a presence here on our podcast as we discuss some of the programs and services that we'll be offering, because we've listened to you and we know what you are asking for. And she will definitely be a presence inside our Patreon communities as we begin to expand the support that we are offering there. Marlana, thank you for being here. It's such an honor, as I said.
Oh, it's an honor to be here with you. I mean, so much I could say there.
Well, we said we were going to promise to keep this short, but watch us. We're going to look at the clock, and in a minute it's going to be an hour. We're not going to do that. We have so much to say. And what I don't want to happen is for this to overwhelm you and say, oh my goodness, that was a heavy podcast. But also I've noticed that some of the most significant and poignant podcasts are the ones where you come back and say just the conversation, just the people say the organic conversation that happens, or when I go off on a tangent and it really resonates with you. So let's just see what happens. Marlana, I would love for you to start with, you started a while ago to tell me a little bit of your story. And when we said, wait, it's time to press record and start getting this on tape. So you have the platform. I'm going to give you the spotlight. You tell me where you want to go with this, because what I hit on there was your childhood, your journey to healing, your experience inside church, because that's a big one. That's a doozy. When we talk about the birth of Christian nationalism, you were at the heart of it.
Yes.
And I think people really need to hear that, and also what it means to be trauma informed. So you take your pick and we'll just go from there, friend.
Eeny, meeny, miny, mo.
Exactly.
It's funny because you asked me to keep it short, but anytime you and I get in a conversation, it's like, what, our hour meeting is over.
I know it.
Let me first say it is an honor to be here. And I have so much gratitude in joining forces with you. And it's so neat in the way that the universe just brings two people together. And there's such a, you always use the word kindredness. And for me, it is that for, people that are the general population, right? But there's a deep connection when you have experienced something in the way of cult-like thinking. You connect with somebody that has the same experience, and then you're like, yes, I have found my people.
Exactly. Exactly. And for a while when you feel so alone,
Mhm.
yeah, I just was on right before our meeting, I had another discussion with somebody who has a similar experience, and that whole feeling like even though you may not, you of course you're not the first person who's ever gone through this, but at the time it feels like it is. And having these platforms like this to find each other, because I love the fact that you and I met on TikTok.
Mhm. Yeah,
That
right.
was our first. So when we talk about virtual sacredness, virtual, like not it just living in that realm, and how the gift that this gives us, because these platforms are allowing us to expand what it means to be in community with one another. So very much feel the same as you do.
Yeah, and one of the questions you had asked was, where am I finding community now?
Mm,
So this may be out of order,
it doesn't
um,
matter. Just
but
go.
that for me is so important, and it's something I teach my clients. It's something I learned in my own therapy journey. And Community is finding folks. For me now is finding folks who are like-minded, and there's an element of protecting what is
Yeah.
now, and each other, each other's story. Your story is your story, my story is my story. And one thing that you and I, Carla, and anybody that comes from that radical conservative world, we were not taught boundaries. We were not offered boundaries. There was no such thing as boundaries in that world. So when we got to this space where we can like exert and exert ourselves and say, hey, no, you know, one of the things that I teach my clients in just the first couple sessions is no is a complete sentence. And you and I know this at this point, but I think even sometimes I forget, to say no, and then feeling like I have to follow up and justify it. And I say all of that to say that I have found my people, my family, my friends, community of TikTok, is that the healing, and those of us that have done this work to get to this space, we get to teach another, because age is a social construct. We've talked about this a lot of times. So we are like these elders who
Yes.
get to teach this next generation, which they're really not, because some of them are older than us, um, in deconstructing and how to really embrace who they are. And I have a story of when I first started, probably back in 2012, and I didn't leave the church until 2015. So 2012, I had a conversation with a friend who, I mean, it's a long story short, but I wanted to share my story with her around my sexual abuse. And this was somebody in the church, and this is somebody that was in ministry with me. And one of the things that we haven't talked about is that in that world, I was the founder and the director of a global nonprofit for single
Mm,
moms. And I can remember saying, I just want to find myself. Like, who am I? Who is Marlana? I knew, that I was hiding my sexuality. I knew that I was married to a man and I had all these children at four at that time, excuse me. And I just wanted to find out. And one of the things you just said when you introduced me was how we find ourselves, right? In that world, that is a sin.
mhm.
Lay yourself down, and everything is about God. Everything and in the way they describe who God is. And so when I first told my mother, I'm on a journey of finding myself, that was like death for her. She thought for sure I was, it was the beginning of becoming the prodigal child for her. And my then husband, who is now my ex-husband, actually for one of the very few times he ever defended me, got on the phone and said, leave her alone. And this is a very, I mean, and I don't really want to go into all that, but I mean, he is somebody who really still follows that dogma, right? So it 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 was a little shocking to me that that moment happened in my home. Like, okay, so I'm gonna go. I need to do this. I need to do this. So, and here I am. What is it? 11 years later, almost to the day, and I have come out. I have left the church. I have children that have been raised in both arenas. I have children who've been raised in only one arena. So that's fun as a parent, because your oldest child is always like, what was I, the guinea pig?
Yeah. Yes, for sure. Ask my daughter.
Yes, buddy, you were the guinea pig.
Yep.
I'm always apologizing,
Yep.
so and then and now I've written, a book about the whole story, but the stories are so they're just deep and rich. And now, when you and I first connected and you asked me to send you, because hiring me on as your director of spiritual guidance, you asked me to send you my resume. And do you remember when I texted you and I said, it's really weird to look at my portfolio and see things
Yes. Yes.
from ministry? And you were
Yeah.
like,
You actually
but
felt like
it's
you
so
had to,
good.
I know, but you felt like you had to qualify it as if, I would not understand that because so much as a founder of a children's program in my church,
Yeah.
as someone who has a lot of my leadership experience came from being an ordained elder, being an administrator, being able to coordinate thousands of volunteers to get something done. There are life skills that came from that. And
Mhm.
it's a really good point. You made so many good points. I don't even know where to start.
Sorry.
But I want to go back to what you said, where you said everything is about God,
Yeah.
because you're absolutely right. And everything that you do in that religious construct, in that high control belief system, is not only about God, but also do not put your suffering in front of Jesus's suffering. So it always has to look through the filter of
Mhm.
of how Jesus suffered for us. Because anything that happened in our world, if it took our eyes off of the leadership, what the leadership says is the highest priority in our lives, is a threat to the patriarchal system.
Correct.
So, and that is your mother's
Correct.
only beacon of light. That's her only truth, is carrying water for that.
Hmm.
She also sees herself. I've often said that my heart breaks for my grandmother, who was probably the best preacher out of all the Southern Baptist ministers in my lineage, who never saw herself in that role because she submitted to the patriarchy. So in order to serve as in ministry, she took a subordinate role that had her fundraising for vehicles and taking people around on trips and things like that. Not that she didn't enjoy it, but she could have been so much more. But because of that, and that reminds me of what your mother was saying when she tells you that, or when she couldn't understand how you said, I need to find out who I am. That
Hmm.
is like one of the most egregious sins that we can make inside that belief system.
Yeah, because you're supposed to lay yourself down.
Yes, absolutely.
I lay myself down if I don't know who I'm laying down.
Exactly.
So,
So you
and yeah.
Well, you mentioned your book, and I want to make sure that we get that out for people who might want to find that. We will also get that on our website, but is it on Amazon right now?
It is. Mhm.
Okay, so we'll also get a link on our website at numasoul.com where Rev Karla has her book recommendations. But just show your book and the name of it and what all is involved with that.
So I began writing this back in 2021, at the very beginning of my trauma healing. I wrote the first 5 chapters. And one of the things, it's for the general reader. I'll leave it at that. Um, the way the first 5 chapters are the way that I was triggered in that conservative world, and it's almost speaking to my inner child. It is literally, it's how, I didn't know what triggers were then. That's not a word I use. It's not a word we use then. It's demons. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Battles are demons. And I kept having these visions of this little girl consistently chasing me down and following me. And if you open the book, in the very first couple pages is the picture of that little girl. And she's about 4 or 5 with pigtails, and I describe all of that. But where I found her, in my mind's eye, where I found her was in a cave, a dark, dark cave, sitting upon this big, large, cold rock by herself with her head down and her pigtails, with her bobby socks and her Mary Janes and their hands in her lap. And it was me. Of course, I didn't know that. Like, it was just, I was like, who, like, what is happening? Like, this is really familiar. This isn't, what is happening here? And even reference in the book, okay, maybe you're, some part of my mom's story, because my mom terminated a pregnancy before me. And like, maybe maybe you're this spirit that's visiting me in the night and trying to tell me something. I'm just going to listen. And I was having these awful dreams, and I talk about it. And then I talk, the next 5 chapters are my journey through 3 different therapists. And I call them the lesbian, mother hen, and then doc, because we don't use names in the book. But that is how I reference them. And they all filled their role. And now I'm on my 4th therapist, who just maintains, and he's this millennial agnostic gay man who went to seminary, who just he's amazing.
I love it. You might have to
So,
give that name out to several people.
so I've had 4 therapists, but the 3 that I talk about are in those second 5 chapters, that second part. And then the rest is my story from childhood on up until just the last few years. But integrating this little girl that was me with who I am now was the most pivotal moment of my entire life. And if I can, I'd love 5 minutes to share that story. But I was reading Tara Brach's Radical Compassion. And I was laying in the bed by myself. Well, I was the only one awake. I should word it that way. And I'm reading it, and I've got my iPad. I was reading it on iPad because, it's dark. And I was married then to my ex-wife, and feeling very alone in this healing journey. And she just says something in there about having compassion for your inner child, just having compassion for yourself. And I shut my eyes. I laid it down on my chest, and I shut my eyes, and I started to cry. And I was right back to that cave with that little girl. And I pulled her up into my lap. I had this vision, and I got goosebumps telling you now, but I pulled her up into my lap. I sat down with her, and I cradled her, and I caressed her like I would one of my own children. And I brought her face up to mine, and I said, I will never, ever leave you. And that was the moment that I integrated. And that's where the book name comes from, because the next day I was on the phone with my therapist going, I'm her. She's me. I'm her. She's me. I am her. And she is me. Like, that's me. That's me. So it was this celebratory moment. But everything I had learned up until that point, there's toxic, and this is a subject for another day, but there's toxic masculinity in the lesbian community. And I was living in it because that's all I knew. It was familiar. And it was just, everything in my life just went click. And this is somebody who was, me, who was, when I was triggered, I was on the floor in fetal positions, crying and sobbing when I was in the middle of a fight. And I couldn't understand, what is wrong with you? Like, get up. What is wrong with you? But it was because I had no emotion. I had this high EQ and high IQ. So I've been told. It is what it is by therapists. But when I was triggered, I was going back to utero. I had no emotional development. So everything inside of me was reacting from a place of utero. I had no.
Well, and you and I were talking off camera about one of the first things that we want to discuss in detail is the inner child healing, and where that's a teaching that I see us bringing to the Patreon community and being able to talk more in detail about your experience and my experience, because why don't you just share an overview about what the inner child, what that looks like when it comes to, you shared your experience, but what exactly does it mean to meet your inner child? And, somebody's out there right now thinking, I've never heard that term before, because we've got all levels of deconstructing people who are still feeling as if just listening to us is a sin.
Yeah.
They're still dealing with that guilt and never have heard anything about the inner child. So could you share a little bit about what that therapy looks like once you become aware, or your desire to work with inner child healing?
So the first step is always the reality, right? And creating this safe space for yourself in the same ways that you and I do for everybody else. And what happens is the reality comes, and I'm gonna stick with religious trauma because most of my, I mean, everything about mine is around religious, and then child abuse and all of that, child neglect and sexual abuse. But it started there. It started in that church space, that mind frame. And so we talk about generational trauma. It's stuck. So my mother and my grandmother were both founding staff members of a very well-known TV evangelist church. And I refuse names because I, number one, I'm not giving the platform to anybody. But
Mhm.
number two, we're going to keep it safe for both you and I.
Sure.
So they were both founding staff members for him of a part of his ministry for unwed mothers. So it was in me. Before I was literally bred
Mhm.
for this. So if for anybody that's listening, it's the knowledge that started way before you could even speak. So there's a pre-verbal piece. And when we get to this place of, you know what, I really am in this place of just wanting to integrate all that child abuse, all of this abuse in my teens, because it's the same thing. How do I integrate all of that and become this whole full person without the man in the sky?
Mm, that's
you know,
good.
and it is free will.
Mhm.
I'm going to use some terms here that I think that will play on both sides. It's free will. There's a peace that comes in knowing this is what I need to do for myself. It does not mean, and I'll be the first one to say it, I claim to be Buddhist Christian. You don't have to leave the church. You just have to find a different church. You
Mhm.
can still love God. You can still love Jesus. You can still have all those parts of your faith and your spirituality. But what is best for you so that you're not relaying that or projecting that onto your children or the next
Ooh,
generation?
that's so good. And that is such a critical part of healing. It's less about what you end up, where you end up. That's always the biggest question. Like, where am I going? Where is this deconstructing healing journey taking me? The journey really doesn't end. And
Never.
but that could scare people who have been, basically, they're kind of spiritually checked out, because church teaches you how to be spiritual by checking the boxes. Get
Mhm.
baptized, come to church, tithe, and then you're living this godly life that reflects the inner, when in reality, spirituality says there's no dichotomy, and there's no separation of those. So who you are, but the collective who you are, not what you have to be to contort yourself to be accepted into this. Who you are is your spiritual essence. So what do you have to do to create the space that's sacred and holds the vessel? And so tying that to inner child work, oftentimes too, is those places where the child development got stunted. We lost a part of ourselves.
Yes.
because of trauma, because of abuse, because of neglect. And oftentimes that's very much close to the very systems of the people that were supposed to keep us safe, whether it's family, whether it's church leaders, whether it's educators. Those places become stilted in our lives and they become markers. And so being healed enough to be able to turn back to those spaces and go, you know what, I want to go back and visit it from that space of not just saying, okay, I have to unpack these things. No, I'm intentionally looking back in my life and saying, I want to see myself as that little girl who was terrified to be alone with my
Mm-hmm.
family member because I knew what was going to happen when I would be.
Mm-hmm.
I need to go back and visit that space. And that, of course, that requires for some people like Marlana and I can sit here and talk about it from a space of healing, because I believe healing is we're always healing. I don't think we ever become healed. We always work on that, just like we work on
Correct.
the body, we work on the mind, we work on our healing. We can do that because
Oh,
we did the work. We have the therapy. So we have the words now to look at that. So having the qualified therapist, spiritual guidance is such an important part. So Marlana, one phrase that you used was trauma-informed therapist that you had that helped you, but also your training as a trauma-informed life coach.
mm-hmm.
So can you talk a little bit about what it means to be trauma informed?
Oh, well, step number one, step number one is creating a safe space, always. And the way you feel safe is not the same way I'm going to feel safe in any environment. That can be your family, it could be with your friends, it could be your work, it could be anywhere. And, like, don't get me started on trauma informed businesses because they're very few and far between. And I wish we
Yeah.
would have more. And what that means and this is where we flirt with the phrase snowflake. Hey, but because nobody wants, like in the patriarchal system, right? Boys pull their boys have to pull their big boy pants on. No crying. Get it together. Get it together. I watched it. For girls, your feelings don't matter anymore.
Yeah.
And there is no in between. You're either boy or girl. There is no gender fluid, non-binary, which
Mhm.
I have those children. Um, so it is a black and white world. God is not a God of feelings. In this world of being trauma informed, we love your feelings. Feel it all. Like, you are validated here. You are seen, and what your perspective is on something, whether I see it your way or not, doesn't really matter. It's your perspective, and I'm going to meet you in your perspective, and I'm going to talk to you in that space. And we're going to, I had a run in with a client, and her perspective was that I screwed her over. Okay, I'm going to meet you there. I'm going to refund you. It's the only one client I've ever had. 99% of my clients have walked through. It's only one. Okay, you're fully refunded. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. It's not a fight. What am I going to do? It was,
Mhm.
but what can I do at that point? And as not to re-traumatize and realizing, excuse me, realizing that there was a much deeper issue there than what I could do as a
Oh, of
life.
course. There you go. Exactly.
It's, you're right. You are right. In your mind's eye, you're right. And that's where we're going to meet you. And I want to create a safe space because if this ever happens again, I'm going to be right here.
Mm.
Not used, but I'm still going to be here. And I think that is one of the things when we talk about inner child, we talk about being trauma informed, and we have to go back and we have to parent ourselves. I know nobody wants to do it. I didn't want to do it. You didn't want to do it. Nobody wants to do it because that was our mama's job and our mama sucked at it. But that's because her mama sucked at it. And that's because generational trauma, right? Especially
Exactly.
in our world. But we have to reparent her or him or them and meet. It's the same idea. The way that I am to meet you where you are is the same way that I am to meet my inner child. Okay, that was your perspective, that was your experience. So we walk out of there from there, or I'm just going to sit down with you in it. Yeah, for me, like where are we sitting today? So and when somebody is when you're creating a trauma informed space, it is, and you come from a religious trauma background with this religion that we're in, it is learning how to say, are you asking for advice, or do you just need me to listen to you today?
That's so good. Yeah.
Because if you didn't ask me for advice, I'm not giving you unsolicited advice. I have a habit of doing that. I'm really well known for like, oh, I need to shut up. You didn't ask me. People that are close to me. But outside of that is, are you just venting? Did you just need an ear? Did you just need a safe space to just let go? Or did you want some advice? If you want some advice, I have all the advice in the world. If you just need me to hold your hand, we'll sit here and hold your hand. If you need some chocolate ice cream, we are going to get ice cream. It's whatever you need. What do you need, Karla? What do you need today? How can I support you? How can I love you? And there we go. We go back to the word love. And one of my favorite authors, I just listened to him this week, and this is I'm so excited to share this with you. And I think I shared it on my Facebook. I don't know if you saw it. But the way he words something is that God is always at the table. It takes love to see him. For
Mm,
me, changing that and saying the divine is always at the table. It takes love to open up to her.
mm. Oh, I love that. And I
And
love the way you took the patriarchal language and the masculine definition of God and turned it into language that's safe for you and is still just as sacred.
yep.
Because again, that's part of the deconstructing process. And oftentimes giving yourself permission, if God is in all of us, then God is indeed divine feminine. And God then means we can give that language that uh, allows us to be seen at the table as well. So I so love that. And by the way, I appreciate your almost daily text where you say, how can I support you today? Even though I sometimes will be like, I don't have time to answer that right now. It's like a burst of love.
Uh,
I can be in the middle of writing, I see it come in and I'm like, oh, that feels so good. That feels so good. I feel so supported and it's like a shot of love. So thank you so much for doing
oh,
that. And
you're welcome.
I eventually answer.
She does. She does answer. Good. She always comes back. She doesn't leave me on red.
That's good. I also want to talk about something that you said tripped you up a little bit because I didn't know where this question came from, but I'm going to put you on the spot. And like I said, Marlene is going to be coming into these podcasts quite often because as the director of spiritual guidance and resource, I want you to, first of all, get to know her, number one. Number two, it's important for you to hear what's going on with our services and what's happening inside Numa Soul Center for Spiritual Transformation. And she's going to be integral to those programs. And so we will expand more on these. We're kind of hitting the high notes tonight, and then we're going to dive deeper into them in other podcasts going forward throughout the year. But when I had suggested that you come on here today, I had put this as one of the things that we would discuss. And I wrote the intersection of religious indoctrination and familial bonds and wounds. Now, we've talked a little bit about that, but what does that phrase mean to you? On this side of I want to give it a little bit of context. I'm asking from the point of you have had an extensive healing journey, and we're going to hear more about your story as time goes on. But what does that mean for you? Because sometimes I'm so far removed from the religious trauma that I even forget. I was reminded this morning of a situation that I completely forgot about.
Mm.
And it came up from somebody challenging me on the book I'm writing and giving me some feedback on it. And I'm going, oh, I forgot. I had told her this story and she remembered it. She's like, I really think this needs to be in the book. And it kind of took me back to that place. So I think I'm asking if that helps give you context when you look back, what do you see as far as where those intersections were, how those were challenged in you, and where you are today with them, with your indoctrination, but also how that affects your familial bonds from, I guess, your extended family, but also your like intimate family, your children. And I'll stop. You
Okay.
have enough clarification now.
So it's so funny because you sent this to me, and then for like 6 days, I'm going intersectionality with my family and my religious. This is what's happening in my head. Like I'm driving, like religious trauma, the wounds. Well, shoot, I would have stopped at that 2012. There's no intersectionality. There is, but it was I stepped away from my extended family. So brief snapshot, my grandmother emotionally raised me, my maternal grandmother. My mom was kind of in and out, and then through the years my grandmother's the person that I leaned on emotionally. So she kind of gave me some of the emotional regulation that I have now, because I don't think I would have any if it had not been for her.
Mm,
She's the one that I could lay my head in her lap and coddled.
mm,
My mother never touched me, never. Um, so there was no healthy touch except from this person who pretty much saved my life. She saved my life. And then all family has dysfunction, and she's got her own. I've got my own. We've got some things there, but she is now in her mid 80s and being taken care of by my aunt, who's 6 years older than me, and they are the only two of three family members I talk to.
mm,
And my grandmother had 5 children. One was my mother. My uncle is one who sexually abused me early on. And this is where this story is going. Um, and this will be a very heavy moment, if you will. And then it may, and I'm just going to reiterate the whole trigger because it's going to. So last Thursday, I'm standing in CVS, and my grandmother, who never calls me because she's in her mid 80s and dementia said it, she doesn't, I call her, I get a phone call, and she used his name, which I'm not going to hear. And she said, he's dead. Just like that. And I'm standing, and I was with someone else, who's, and she looked at me and said, you need, because she could put it together. She's like, you need to go out. And she took care of everything. And I went out to the parking lot. I was in shock. I was in so much shock. And it wasn't this shock of, oh, I don't have to worry about that anymore. It was, I never thought that that would be a phone call I'd ever get. I haven't seen or spoken, or, I did a bunch of healing. And back in 2012, 2013, my grandmother sat me down and told me that this person admitted everything to her. And verbatim said to her, Mom, you're going to hate me. I messed up a lot of little children's lives. He admitted it. 1 week later, my mother calls, and my mother says, I still don't believe her. Why doesn't she believe her? Because why doesn't she believe me? Because it would mean accountability. I
mhm,
know that. But in the moment that my grandmother told me, and then that happened back in 2013, so 10 years ago almost, I found forgiveness because he comes from the same line of trauma that I come from, and it's happened to him. I get it. Not that I wanted to be around him. I wasn't subjecting myself to him anymore. I wasn't going to subject my children to him anymore. And my grandma and my mother became the monster in that moment, more than he ever was. So I tell you all this because my grandmother says to me on the phone when she calls and tell me this last week, and says, I didn't know if it would bring up a bunch of stuff for you, and I didn't want to trigger you or to hurt you or to bring it all. And I'm so upset. I was scared, and nobody else was going to call you. And I said, stop. I'm okay. I'm at peace. And I could hear this like exhale, and she's crying. So now my grandmother, who still believes in the same ways that I was raised, says to me, and she starts crying uncontrollably, and she says, yes, but I don't know if he did a deathbed salvation. Is a soul in heaven?
mm. Oh,
So this is where it intersects for me.
Oh, wow. Now, oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I feel this. So
So,
that, yes, go.
and I said, my mom, that's what I call her. I, she's my hero in a lot of ways. And I do not believe the same way that she believes. And she loves me for who I am. Even now that I'm out, she was at my wedding. Okay. She supported me, but I'm listening to her. And I said, there is not a single person around you that's going to tell you it's okay to feel what you feel. Number one, she said, I know. I said, I will always tell you it's okay to feel. Cause she said, I don't know whether to be happy or to be sad. That's my son. And I said to her on the phone, he is a son, he is a brother, he is a father, he's an uncle. There's sadness, it's okay. But he was also battling, and used her terminology, a lot of demons. It's not terminology I would use today, just for everybody to know. It's not something I would say. And she said, yes, he was. Yes, he was. But what if, what if, what if? And I said, he is at peace and he is no longer being tortured by his soul. I am so glad, and I hope he rests there for the, like, rests in peace. I found forgiveness a long time ago, and I walked through all that. But and forgiveness is, we're taught in that world that forgiveness is just you automatically give it, forgive, forget, move on.
Exactly. It's an obligation. It's an
That is
obligation.
not how therapy works. It is not the goal. It is never the goal, and we don't even talk about it in trauma therapy.
Yeah. That
It comes,
that right there will be a podcast conversation for sure.
yeah. And I just said, she's like, well, I always believe that the devil is sitting on one shoulder and God is sitting on the other, and you have a choice. And I said, well, I don't believe that way anymore. And I said, and I've watched that man run the aisles in church crying out to God to save him. He begged for people to hear him, to save him. As I was a little girl, I watched this man who hurt me cry out to God over and over again. He was not okay mentally. He had a mental illness. And then he had all the generational trauma on top of him. So if I can be in this place and I could look at him, and then I can look at my grandmother and say, he's at peace, and you need to find that, and it's okay for you to be happy. It's okay for you to be happy. It's okay for you, like, the black and white thinking is not there. Two things can be true at the same time. All the things can be true at the same time. It's okay to be happy, it's okay to be sad, it's okay to be angry, it's okay to be joyous. It's okay. And it was conversation, and I was supposed to call her and I didn't call her back, but we hung up, and I felt better because I got to speak to her in that way, in a way that nobody else in my family is going to talk to her.
So that's where I want to go with this, because for when you first said that, the shift from you dealing with the fact that your abuser, you were holding space with the news that your abuser had died, to the point where the woman who you revere as a emotional caretaker in your childhood, now you are turning to be a comforter.
Mm-hmm.
And what I want people to hear from this is your healing journey made you available to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
If you had not gone through it. So in the moment if I want someone needs to hear this. It is okay if you cannot be that person, if you cannot be that comforter.
Yes.
That's not to hear Marlena's story and say, oh, I didn't do that, or I can't do that. That means you can't do it now. That
Correct.
means, where we are right now with the resources that we have, that's who we are. But if we're committed to healing, who will be 3, 5, 10 years from now? Because if this had happened to you 6 years ago, who knows what your response would have been. But what I love about it is that you showed that both can be true, that you needed space and more, and it could be the fact that you didn't call her back because you still are processing some of this,
Yeah.
so that you are making space for your healing. But whatever allowed you to put that away for a minute to say, my grandmother needs me.
Mm-hmm.
because in her indoctrinated belief, her fear was overtaking her, and you had the capacity in that moment to comfort her is so beautiful. And you did that, and probably why this question of religious indoctrination and familial bonds, hello, and wounds is like it's always there. You know,
Let me
this whole thing about boundaries, what they
mhm.
started with. Hello, yes, please keep going.
Let me add one thing to this. I reached out to one of the three therapists I mentioned in my book. I reference her as Mother Hen, and I said, I need to share this with you. This is what happened. And she said, isn't it amazing? Because I said to her, he doesn't have a hold on me anymore. He never had a, like, there's so much peace in the healing. Like, he doesn't have that hold. And there are other people in my life, and you learn about them in my story. He's not the only person that's hurt me, but he was the first one. And probably younger than two. My earliest memory is two, but probably younger than two. And and all the way up until probably 16. But I it was it was peaceful. And she said, isn't it great that you can exemplify your healing and how much he doesn't have a hold on you anymore?
Oh, my goodness.
And and we learn, oh, just set it down, but that would not have happened. And like you said, for the people that are listening, you may never get to that place. That is, like, statistically, that doesn't happen. Some of us are holding on to it until we're dying, and we hate the person, and
Yeah.
it's okay. Hate them. You're allowed to do that. You can hate them, you can shun them, you can put them in, wherever you need to put them in your mind, because they did hurt you. They did. So, for anybody listening, I want to make sure that they understand that this is not, I don't want that triggering any of that, but I
Yeah, but
it was,
those moments where you can exemplify your healing, it may not look just like what you just described, but they're there. And it's
yeah,
all about how can we turn back to our world a better version of ourselves, a healed version of ourselves, so we're available to those we love. And in that moment, that's what you were. That's what our healing is often about. If we can bring that, not only peace, but then joy in our inner circle, our most sacred inner circle of those that we have closest to us. Hopefully those are the people that you not only love the most, but you're safest with.
yeah.
And that's another thing. But you said something, and I'm making this another note here. Just set it down. That I just went from 0 to 60. Remember, I think I have forgotten that phrase. Just set it down. Oh, put it at the feet of Jesus.
Oh, yeah.
Just lay it at the Lord's feet. Oh, Lord. And somehow miraculously it's supposed to be done. But really it's words for don't talk about it anymore.
Correct.
That's it. You have now done that. Do not bring it to your church, spiritual community, because you set it at Jesus' feet.
You know what? One of the biggest pieces that drove me to that healing, though, and you'll get this because you were in ministry. I am a monster in somebody's life. There is somebody out there, and I know it to be true because I I spoke to thousands of single mothers across the world. I know it to be true. And statistically, I, I mean, what's the percentage of those that were in the closet and battling their sexuality like me? And I was preaching against homosexuality. So I am a monster in somebody's story. And that's how I would want them to meet me.
Hmm. Marlana, thank you. Oh my goodness. The time has gone by, and this might be a good stopping
Yeah.
point for us this month. But I wanted to just offer you to give whatever closing thought what are your what are you thinking about this time, but also your role as the spiritual director of spiritual guidance and communication for Numa. You're just getting started in that role, but maybe share a little bit, and then I'll do the closing out for the podcast.
So I always will say I don't really feel like I have a whole lot to share, but we all know that Marlana talk just like Karla can. So um, I think that where I am in this space, it is surreal to me that I am back in some sort of ministry role, but supportive. Like I'm not leading. That's all you. That's all you, girl. You do that.
I got that
um, but I feel very at peace being back here. And I mentioned my 4th therapist, and when I first started with him, I said, I'm afraid to pick up a microphone again. I'm afraid because it was triggering for me. And he's like, did you think about just starting small? Like, you just wrote your book, just small. They keep it real. Millennials keep it real.
Yeah.
And he's my beef every other week. But so here I am. And then out of the blue, here I am stepping into this role with Numa Soul. And I am getting to watch so many people comment or message you and see just the beginning of the evolution of where you and I were at once. And it's so damn beautiful.
Yeah.
The rawness, the vulnerability, the fear, even the fear, because for them to express fear in their comments or whatever, that's a massive place of vulnerability. And I get to be a part of an organization that creates a safe space that wants to be trauma informed, I didn't have that. You didn't have that. It's why we're here. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so as folks are walking through their journey, wherever they are, because we're all on different parts of our journey and nobody's better than the next person, is just being in this supportive role and getting to come under. And I know that not everybody can see me, but as I cradle my hands and just saying, okay, like we're going to just keep you safe right here. Just keep you safe right here. And then, sending them off into the world to do what you're doing, to do what I'm doing, to be able to speak into the lives of other people. It's a massive movement. You say it all the time, that this movement of deconstruction it's massive.
Yep.
You say it all the time. I hear you in your words, in your videos, when we text. And how cool is it that it's worked full circle?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Marlana Glaeser, Director of Spiritual Guidance and Communications for Numa Soul. I'll get that right in a minute. I even say sometimes, what's my title? I don't even know. Do I have a title?
Yeah, you are Rev Karla.
Rev Karla. That's who I am.
Are the fearless leader.
As my grandchildren call me, I'm also Tata. If you want to get a hold of Marlana, we don't have her completely set up on email yet, but you can email us at info@numasoul.com if you have any questions about upcoming programs and services. But now I'll do the closing out. You can find our show notes wherever you are listening to this podcast. We will be putting in Marlana's book, as well as some of the books and some of the things that we referenced here in this podcast. If you'd like to watch the uncut version of today's episode, you can do so on our YouTube channel. And also please subscribe, because that helps us in that algorithm universe. You can also check out our Patreon and join the Numa Soul membership and access all of our unique opportunities, including both bonus content and our weekly live sessions there. And I invite you to, of course, to connect with us on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. And you can find all of those platforms, our social media links, at our website, revkarla.com, or Numa Soul Center for Spiritual Transformation at numasoul.com. Okay, beloveds, I'm honored to be in this space with you. And I prayed you receive something. I know I did, because the teacher teaches what she needs to hear. And now, beloveds, go in peace and be at peace. Go in love, and may you be loved. Go and know that others are on this journey with you, and you are not alone. You are seen and deeply and unconditionally loved, just the way you are. Blessings on your week, and I will see you soon. Bye for now.